Hello and welcome to my channel. Before starting, support the channel by liking this video and subscribing to this channel for future updates. Today we're going to talk about the rise of BRICS, exploring the potential of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. November 2021 marked the 20th anniversary of the conception of BRICS. 2 decades have passed since the acronym BRIC, Brazil, Russia, India, China, was brought into our popular vernacular by Jim O'Neill, an economist at Goldman Sachs. Footnote 1 is influential paper entitled Building Better Global Economic Brics analyzed the spectacular economic growth this group of countries were set to experience and the implications of these future trends for international political economy. For enthusiastic consumers of the report and detractors alike, the term BRICS, where these at the end denotes plural, and its embedding within unambiguously optimistic economic predictions by a leading investment bank was a clear indication of how these countries were being constructed as profitable investment destinations to which global financial flows could be directed. The external acronym, in fact, served as an impetus for the leaders of the 4 nations to act on the economic optimism surrounding them when they first met in 2006 alongside the UN General Assembly. Delegates from the 4 countries met more formally in Yekaterinburg, Russia in 2009 to give an institutional form to BRICS. In the initial period that followed, the BRICS became an aspirational bloc with its own internal dynamics. They held yearly summits, had diplomatic ambitions, made commitments to large-scale infrastructure projects within their national boundaries as well as transnational ones in their regions. They flexed their economic muscle by establishing a new lending institution, the New Development Bank, and challenging the hegemony of European and North American countries in international finance. In 2011, South Africa joined this country grouping as an economic outperformer in the global South, an emerging economy, and a young democracy, taking the BRICS to BRICS, where the CS now stood for its newest member. With this addition, the BRICS countries accounted for 26% of the global landmass and 20% of the total global GDP, while skeptics and cautious enthusiasts variously describe the BRICS as a kind of loose association, a Potemkin village, or a club of coincidence. This grouping undoubtedly comprised of countries with common economic aspirations and similar ideas on the type of multilateralism and shifts in global political economy that would be required to achieve them. It is these underlying economic aspirations that have served to reinvigorate the flow of capital within and across BRICS countries amidst a financing vacuum within a post-financial crisis world. In 2017, nearly a decade after the 2008 financial crisis, the BRICS accounted for 19% of global investment inflows. Much of these financial flows have been channeled into capital-intensive, land-hungry infrastructure projects. In this introduction, we reflect on the BRICS countries, exploring the politics that underlie these nations' dynamic economic and political transformations over the past 20 years. We do so more specifically through the lens of land, where these larger transformations have come to be expressed. In the last 2 decades, the BRICS countries have undergone dramatic land use transformations or initiated large-scale infrastructure projects within the regions of which they are a part. For example, China's attempts at re-establishing the Silk Road economic belt across Europe, Asia, and Africa. In India, the Modi administration's plan to develop 100 smart cities connected by bullet trains, Moscow's aspiration to build the Russian Far East into a new economic bridge between Europe and Asia through the development of advanced special economic zones, and the expansion of industrial large-scale farming in Brazil and South Africa, are all manifestations of the BRICS visions for sustainable and smart development. These land use transformations are results of shifting economic interests and priorities, as well as imaginations about their past and future. Since the state, market, and politics are deeply intertwined within the lives of land, processes and practices through which land is developed and transformed reveal the workings of economic and social power. Land then serves as a compelling medium through which one can pin down the combination of political and social institutions and economic interests that ground spectacular amounts of capital as investment in BRICS countries. This special section and our reflections here in this introduction emerge from an interdisciplinary conference held at the University of Oxford's Department of International Development in 2019 and the discussions that have ensued since. At the time, our intention was to reflect on the large-scale land transformations taking place in the BRICS bloc, organized across 3 broad spatial themes: 1. Belts, corridors, zones; 2. Trading floor, real estate, the city; and 3. Farms, forests, commons. We identified these spaces as important for critical reflection on the BRICS countries because they represent spaces of contestation. between the planned and unplanned, formal and informal, the rural and urban, of shifting economic interests and priorities. The negotiations within these contested spaces thus merit our attention. The set of papers published in this special section of the ODS represents a slice of these initial inquiries. They are diverse in terms of frameworks and methodologies. Papers by Tim Zavinons and Asmita Cabra and Bukhadiya Das. Conservation in India use the concepts of accumulation by dispossession and regime of dispossession respectively to shed light on the logics of capital accumulation at the transnational and national level. Papers by Daniela Barbosa, Edmundo Otterich, and Angela Camana, Soy Production in Brazil, and Yevon Zhao, Urbanization in China, provide ethnographically informed analyses and deploy the concepts of cosmopolitics from political ecology and performativity and multidimensionality, respectively, to complicate politics over land at the subnational level. Through the lens of land, however, these papers capture how local politics combine with larger structural economic forces in BRICS to actualize financial flows in BRICS. In doing so, they also provide an account of the changing nature of the state and its institutions in BRICS nations, specifically in highlighting the ways in which formal rules of land governance are bent, modified, revised, and abandoned to accommodate the newer demands of capital, as well as visions of sustainable development, smart urbanization in the case of China, and conservation in the case of India. The state can no longer be neatly categorized as a developmental, predatory, or party state. The state's control of land through legal and bureaucratic maneuverings in India and deployment of local party officials and discourses in China reveal how the state remains formidable yet flexible to incorporate 21st century visions of development. Academic scholarship on the implications of BRICS as an entity, the power of its pooling together of economic resources, or its political valence as a discursive formation is relatively underdeveloped. Exceptions exist, such as the interconnected changes in industrial policy in the BRICS and the reproduction of imperialist logics in amassing natural resources and labor cheaply, emanating from its location as a southern bloc in the era of globalization. The BRICS grouping has served as an empirical context for comparative analysis for a number of topics and issues such as urban housing, but also cumulative learning by analyzing lessons from each of the composite units on water conservation and wastewater management. As with a well-established strand of literature discussed in the next section, we focus on individual countries. The brief but contested potential of BRICS as a cohesive bloc has been in decline in recent years. In fact, Maudsley argues that the initial cohesion is increasingly impossible to sustain amid differing and at times even conflicting political interests amongst the BRICS nations. Thanks for watching.